Okay, thank you very much. Thank you guys. Very good job. So now we're gonna get on to the next talk of today. This is gonna be on finding your big idea. And we're gonna invite a speaker to the stage. But the way we're gonna do this at the GSY is to give that person a rock star round of applause. And I want you guys to help me with that. So I'm just gonna test this one time. Are you guys ready for doing a big applause? Are you ready for doing a big applause? So let's just test this one time. We're gonna pretend I'm gonna bring somebody on stage, some imaginary person. We could call him, I don't know, Steve Jobs or something. So please, let's give a warm round of applause for Steve Jobs! Guys, when I say rock star round of applause, I mean really, really get there. So we're gonna do it one more time. Let's welcome Steve Jobs! Way to go. So we're gonna do a talk on finding the big idea. And I would like you guys to join me in welcoming Roger Dickey to the stage. So let's give a huge round of applause for Roger Dickey!
Thanks so much for getting the energy going. So I promise that finding your idea won't be as hard as that clapping and stomping exercise. That was definitely a challenge. Okay, so we're gonna get the slides up here in a minute. We're working on that. How are you guys doing this morning? Good, good. Not too tired? I got over my jet lag yesterday, thankfully. All right. So I love I love talking about finding your idea because I feel like it's one of the less explored but most important concepts in starting a business. Obviously, the idea is the foundation that everything's built on top of, and you've probably heard of lean startup. You've read a lot of resources online on validating an idea, on customer development, getting in front of people. But what's not talked about as much is practical frameworks and how you can actually come up with good ideas if you're not lucky enough to have something that just comes naturally to you. So we're going to talk about that a little today. And even if you do have an idea that just came naturally to you, or that your team feels really good about, that you sort of discussed yesterday, I'll give you a framework to validate that idea, kind of high level. And later, another speaker, I think Orion is going to cover validation more, or some different angles on kind of finding an idea. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm sure I'm sure a lot of you are wondering, how do I find a great idea? But what you're really wondering is, am I going to be a successful entrepreneur? Am I going to start a big business? Am I going to become a millionaire? However you kind of phrase it to yourself. Well, the good news is there's a model you can use to kind of prove to yourself that you will. So the way I like to think of it is there are opportunities and there's entrepreneurs. So I frame this question as the ratio of legitimate opportunities, of real multi-million-dollar size businesses that someone could do, to qualified entrepreneurs. Folks like yourself, since you were invited here today, who could actually build one of these businesses, right? And there's a lot of people who try to start businesses. You've heard the old adage, 9 out of 10 startups fail. Well, that's definitely true, but 9 out of 10 startups that you do don't necessarily fail, right? So there's definitely entrepreneurs who are more qualified than others. And the good news is this ratio, from what I've seen, is greater than 1. So there's an opportunity here for each of you. It could be something it could be a business you had direct experience working with. Maybe you had a job for a couple of years. Maybe you worked in the shipping industry. You notice something's really broken about shipping. Well, I guarantee you there's a multi-million-dollar business for you that you could start and build that would be in that space. So where does the idea fit in? There's a lot of stages to doing a company, and actually, at least from my angle, the bottom of this is blocked off, but on the lower left there, it should say idea. So you start off with an idea. You go through and validate the idea. This is the process of getting it in front of some of your initial customers, making sure that it's a real problem you're solving, that sort of thing. Next is product market fit. So at least in Silicon Valley, the way product market fit is usually defined is is I've actually made a product, it's live, all the kinks are worked out, it's in production, and I have, depending on the space, anywhere from 10,000 to 100,000 users. So I've proven that this product actually fits into the market. Do I have the whole market yet? No, I don't, but I'm on a path to having the whole market, and I have a product that has the right business model and sort of all the right components. So that's a much sort of later stage in the development process. After that comes efficiency. You're able to acquire customers, people like your product, but can you acquire customers efficiently? Does it cost you less money to acquire a customer than you earn? In other words, is the acquisition cost less than the lifetime value? And then finally sort of scaling up from there, and that's where you become a $100 million company and eventually go public. So where are we right now? We're, as this shows, we're at the idea phase, and this is all I'm going to discuss today. I'm not going to get into the rest of this. I know you guys have heard a lot of talks, and really, what's the most important for you today and what you're going to be judged on is, not have you scaled something or even have you found real product market fit, but do the judges think that on paper you have a good idea that solves a real problem that people actually care about? So we're going to talk about how to do that. So first of all, what is an idea? So an idea is a problem and a solution. It's a real problem. If you looked up ideation online or you've read Quora posts on ideation, a lot of people talk about the problem and they say focus on the problem. Well, the problem is part of it. Let's just throw out a quick example. Let's say a problem is kids aren't learning geometry well enough in junior high school in whatever country you come from. Well, is that a real problem? No, I'd argue it's not a real problem. Is the real problem that education is broken? Yes, that might be a problem in a lot of countries, but it's not a specific enough problem to build a business around. You'll end up kind of chasing your tail around in circles if that's what you think about every day at work. So what could be a real problem here? Well, saying that learning geometry is hard for junior high school kids, that's not really specific enough either. Which kids is it hard for? Where are they located? How do you reach those teachers? Is the problem really for students? Do they really want to learn geometry? Or is the problem for teachers and parents? So the real problem around that idea might be parents feel like their students aren't learning geometry well enough, and it's specifically in these school districts, and it's specifically this type of geometry. So that's something you could actually start with. It'd be a meaningful problem to solve. Now, is that a big problem to solve? That's a question. The measure of an idea really is the size of the impact that it can make on the world or on whatever market you're in. So is that big? No, maybe that's not as big as solving education, but it could be a good starting point that's actually practical that people would want to use. So solution. So an idea isn't a problem, and some people online talk about ideas as equating to problems. Even Paul Graham of Y Combinator has an essay he's written that says that ideas are really just problems, and you could reframe an idea as just a problem statement. Well, that's not really enough. So the execution part of a business is a lot of the solution. Like, which people do you hire? How do you raise money? How do you scale the business? But you also as part of the idea, you need some understanding at least up front, at least on paper, of how you're going to solve the issue. So for this geometry problem we have, the idea could be, okay, some kids in this particular area are having trouble learning geometry, so we're going to make a mobile application that their parents can get them to download that would have them let's say, study certain lessons, and if they do well, they get more allowance from their parents, or they get some benefit. So that's a very specific idea. Then you can go start to build that. Then there's questions around execution, how do you hire people, what do you code, et cetera. So a good idea, to this point earlier, is a real problem and a practical solution. So you probably all have an idea right now or some semblance of an idea, but what I want to discuss today is how you make sure you're actually solving a real problem, as we said earlier, and that you have a practical solution you could actually build that people would want to use. So I'm sure many of you have heard this. And actually, when I was asked to give this talk, this is the first thing that went through my mind, that some of you may have this concern, and even some of my peers here who are speakers, kind of echoed this concern. But the thing about this is, as a blanket statement, it's false. Ideas, and I thought this through because I've heard this so many times, and it's kind of rubbed me the wrong way, because I've struggled in a few businesses I've done to find Sorry? Oh. I've struggled in a few businesses I've done to find a good idea, but anyhow, yeah, I mean, it's kind of rubbed me the wrong way, and I want to explore specifically why in this next slide. So what value does an idea have? Well, let's talk about the value of an idea versus execution. And this is really high level, but it's important to understand to figure out sort of where to look for your idea, where specifically you should look for it, and what kind of timing you want to have. So ideas can be pretty worthless. I would argue an idea is worthless if you're way too early or if you're way too late. So a great example here is the iPad. The concept of tablet computing has actually been around since the 70s or 80s. It's not a new idea. It's not like Apple invented this idea 5 years ago. So what if you had that idea in the 70s or 80s and tried to start a business? Well, you can't. You couldn't have built a tablet in a cost-effective way in the 70s or 80s. Personal computing wasn't in the right place. LCD technology didn't even exist. You couldn't do it. So that idea practically is worthless. You can't start a business around it. Let's say you want to start a tablet company today. Well, you're too late because Apple already has the #1 brand in tablets. And if somebody wants to go on the low end, you can actually buy a cheap like Samsung tablet powered by Android for $50 or $60. Do you want to compete in that business? Do you want to make like a $45 tablet? You're just squeezing your margin down to nothing, and that's not an interesting business to be in. Where an idea is valuable is if you get the timing just right. So this is also referred to as the Goldilocks principle. Not too early, too late, just right. So we'll look a little bit about this, but yeah, you wanna really like where ideas matter is when you actually catch something at the right time. So how do you value execution? I would argue that if you're too early, execution has negative value because you're actually wasting your time. There's a real opportunity cost. So that's where we are kind of on the left here. Execution, here's the orange line. When you're in just the right zone, execution has some value, but execution is actually not as valuable as the idea because you've hit the idea at the right time. And the reality is, in the world, if you really find an idea at just the right time, there's actually a lot of entrepreneurs who are capable of executing that idea. But you're the one who got to it first. So the idea is more valuable in this middle range here. And then as you get to the too late side, the value of the idea drops to nothing, and execution becomes very important. So let's discuss now some practical, concrete frameworks you guys can use. So pay close attention here. Some of these will be useful for you later in the exercise. I forgot to mention there'll be a brief 5-10 minute exercise after this talk where you get to actually use some of the practical knowledge we discussed here to weigh ideas against each other. So some of these may be helpful to you in that. So one framework to use, and this one's a really popular one. I see a lot of ideas in Silicon Valley come from this. Is what's broken in the world right now? So in the words of Paul Graham, and if you don't read his writing, you definitely should. You don't think up startup ideas, you notice them. And this may seem somewhat anathema to this talk, but the reality is some people don't notice good ideas. Or if you're a first-time entrepreneur, you might not know if you've really found a good idea. Some notable examples here. Google noticed that search results took too long to get and didn't have the right relevance. Tesla, I mean, there's a number of problems solved by Tesla. One is fossil fuel consumption. Another is now Tesla's moving into self-driving cars. Imagine how many problems that solves. You don't have to park anymore. You just leave your car at a robot valet and it does its thing, right? And another one you may or may not have heard of is Trunk Club. This is maybe a smaller problem, but a real problem. A lot of guys don't know how to dress, right? Maybe they don't think they can pick good-looking clothing. Trunk Club is a website you can go to that will help you buy clothing. Another framework you can use. Just take out your mobile phone and look at the home screen. The apps on the home screen of an iPhone were very carefully chosen by Apple to cover every aspect of somebody's life that they want to consume on mobile. And they didn't get it right 100% of the time. Granted, there have been app developers who've come along with other ideas that Apple didn't have or didn't think of. But a lot of these are really great to draft off of. So message. There's a number of messaging apps. WhatsApp is a notable example. WhatsApp has over 100 million users. The calendar. You may have heard of Sunset. You may have heard of iCal. There's a number of new calendar applications coming out, at least in Silicon Valley, that people I know are using. I look at the home screen of a friend of mine, and they've replaced out almost all of these icons. Photos. How many photo sharing applications can you think of, right? So this is a good starting point if you'd like to do something on mobile, but you're not sure what to do. You can look here for inspiration. You've heard of Waze, I'm sure, which made a better map app, and they got bought by Google for $800 million. And obviously Snapchat is kind of a funny way to share photos. Another framework, how do people spend money? This is kind of a really top-down macro perspective, but it can jog your memory. It can kind of jog your thinking to get you focusing on areas where people actually are spending real dollars. So this graph is the United States right here, and it's a little hard to read, at least for me. But on the lower left there, that huge red section of the pie chart is housing. There's a lot of startups that focus on housing. Trulia is an example. Trulia is a search engine in the US you can use to buy houses. That sort of pink area in the upper left, transportation. So Uber would be an example of this in the United States. It's an app you can use to call a taxi very easily. Most countries have something like this now. Going around the top, you have some smaller things. The blue area, food. There's countless apps that help you with food, either whether it's going to restaurants or buying groceries. Instacart is an example. They were a Y Combinator company about a year ago. You can order groceries on your mobile phone and somebody delivers them directly to your house. So as you go around this wheel, I'm sure there's a lot more ideas you could have if you look this up for your country or your market. Another way to think is to look at markets, look at so-called unsexy markets that other entrepreneurs might not have wanted to go after. So photo sharing is an example of something that, at least in Silicon Valley, we would call sexy. It's a market that a lot of people have gone after. There's a lot of applications. It's popular to do that. Dating is another example, no pun intended. A lot of people, for some reason, like to make dating apps or dating websites. The world doesn't need 1,000 dating websites. We need 10 or, I don't know, depending who you ask, 0. So there are a lot of markets, though, you can find that really haven't had much innovation. Technology hasn't touched them as much as it has other markets, where there's a lot of opportunity. So over here, this is some data off the U.S. Census Bureau. This again, go back one. This again is a little hard to read, but these are like 3 of the major sectors in the United States, broken out very specifically by subsector. So you could go read this, and you might get an idea in shipping or transportation or packaging of goods or something industrial like that. And I'm sure many of your countries have bureaus like this where you can get data. So a couple examples of some unsexy companies. Again, on the shipping front, moving is a big problem for a lot of people. So at least in the U.S., the way moving is done is you go on like Yelp or Craigslist. You look up a bunch of moving companies. Maybe you look up 4 or 5. You have them all come out to your house. And you generally have to take time off of work. And you have to meet somebody at your place. Then you have a stranger walk through your house, look at all your stuff, and they write you an estimate at the end for how much you're going to have to spend to move. Well, MoveLine lets you just kind of swing your phone around, take a video of your house, and then in the cloud, up to 20 or 30 different local moving firms can compete for your business. So is moving a sexy space? No, but this, at least in my opinion, is a really good idea. And it's a big market in the U.S. It's like $20 or $30 billion. Adapar. How many of you heard of Mint.com? Personal financial management. So Adapar is Mint.com for very wealthy people. So if you have assets in excess of $50 to $100 million, Adapar will help you manage all of that. It's not that sexy of a space to make Mint software for like the top wealthiest million people in the world, but somebody had to do it, and Adapar did. I'm actually an investor in that company. They're doing really well. Zen Payroll is another example. Processing, I don't know how many of you have actually run companies or are running companies right now, but processing payroll can be annoying. I get a call every 2 weeks from my payroll representative, and I have to manually give them payroll information over the phone. It's a pain in the ass. We've actually just moved to Zen Payroll, and now I just get an email every month that lets me automatically run payroll for my company. This is maybe poorly timed, but how many of you heard of the U.S. government shutdown? Yeah, probably everybody. Actually, as I was looking for Census Bureau data, I reached the census website and it says, due to the lapse in government funding, census.gov sites are down. So I was unable to get to this data. Thankfully, I had a spreadsheet saved in my computer so I could show you guys that illegible screenshot on the previous slide. Another framework to use is just be inspired directly by what venture capitalists and investors, other investors, are looking for. If you visit any of these investors' websites and most other top-tier investors in the Valley and elsewhere around the world, they'll have some page or blog or a section that says about us, our thesis, what we believe in, ideas we'd like to fund, our ethos, whatever it's called, that'll actually tell you exactly what they want to fund. Because VCs are ultimately businesses too. They want to make money and they want to succeed. So, you know, they don't like it when you pitch them and they have to reject you. They actually want to fund you. They want your business to be successful. So oftentimes if you can go to an investor website, or better yet, talk to an investor that you know, reach out on LinkedIn and just say, hey, I'd love to buy you coffee and just pick your brain. They'd love to tell you what they think is interesting. They do it all day. I don't know if this is the last one, but another framework, and this underlies some of the other frameworks in a lot of ways, but in a sense it's its own thing. Is to just do what I call an A plus B business. So to say, I'm going to take proven thing A. So we know that people move. To use the move line example, people have to move. They already do that. They spend $20 billion a year doing it. And add disruptive thing B. In this case, mobile. So moving plus mobile equals move line, and that's, you know, it's as I said, it's a really cool business. So to get more specific here, what is B? So B is something that's disruptive, that's non-obvious, like some insight that kind of you have or that you came up with, or proprietary, something that you uniquely have access to that nobody else does. And this thing specifically is a distribution channel. So Facebook was that. I founded a game called Mafia Wars in 2008, and there was nothing new about a Mafia game online. That had been done before, in different forms. Doing a Mafia game on Facebook was a new idea, and that was a new distribution channel that took it to massive success. Could be a new technology. Maybe there's a really small chip somebody came out with that costs $1, and you can put it into a shipping label or a toy for children. A new platform. Mobile is a great example here. New data. Maybe you somehow have access to information about where all the trucks stop in the United States and how trucks move around. Well, you could build a whole network off of that data that you could then sell to shipping companies so they can predict movements of goods. Or entry vectors is kind of another thing. So this is this was Facebook's innovation, was to say, you know, we're going to make a social network. MySpace is already out there. MySpace has 40 or 50 million users. But we're going to go in through the college angle. And there are a few other things they did. They were much better at pictures, and Facebook had real identity. But aside from sort of pictures, identity, and Facebook's entry vector, there was really nothing new about it. Okay, so you've sat down with your team. You either already have an idea, or you've gone through some of these some of these ideation frameworks. Now you have a list of, let's say, 10 or 20 ideas. How do you choose the best idea? Well, I'll answer that question with a question. Who evaluates startup ideas for a living? So as we've discussed earlier, investors, right? Investors are great to talk to. And as an investment, you might not think of yourselves as investors, but you are. When you do a startup, whenever that is, you're going to invest a significant amount of your youth, which is a valuable, very limited commodity in this company that you're going to do. And I don't know what you feel your professional prime is. Maybe for you it's 20 to 40 or 30 to 50 or whatever it is. You have a limited amount of time in your professional prime to pursue different startup ideas. So taking a couple of years on an idea is a very, very large investment. So why not think like an investor? Because investors do this full time. For a living, every single day they evaluate ideas. And this is just a rough way to think of how long a startup might take you. This holds true for me from personal experience. Takes you about 6 months to a year to kind of get a startup off the ground, figure out what your idea is, code it, build the initial team, and get some validation. Then after that, you're talking about efficiency and scaling, and you grow it for as long as you want. Maybe it's 2 years, maybe it's 4 years, whatever that is. If you then sell a company, which is usually how you'll exit. Most startups obviously don't IPO, so an acquisition is the most likely scenario. You generally will have to stay at the acquiring company for a little while, anywhere from a year to 2 years. I was at Zynga on the high side of that, because I was I was learning a lot and it was a fun environment. So yeah, so not just you guys, but even if you leave today and you're like, entrepreneurship isn't for me, I just want to go get a job somewhere, you should still think like an investor, because ultimately you're investing your career and your career development in wherever you work. Okay, so what do investors look for? How can you measure your idea and see if you have something that would interest investors, that would interest you, that you should spend your time on? So I'll go over these. I'll go over each of these briefly. Are you solving a real problem? We talked about this earlier. Team and actually problem. This is one of the top reasons investors turn down ideas. You'd be surprised. It might seem easy to find a real problem. For some reason, I see so many startups in Silicon Valley that just don't solve any real problem. Really silly ideas. Team experience and fitness. Do you have the right team to actually tackle this challenge? Is your team sort of fit for this idea? You might have a great team of people who went to top schools, MIT, Cornell, Caltech, whatever. But are you guys right to solve this issue? Because the reality is, if you're pursuing a real opportunity, if you're in a $10 billion market and you've timed the idea just right, there's actually 10 teams around the world or 100 teams around the world who've had the same idea at the same time. What's the likelihood that one of those teams is more fit to solve the idea than you? If you're just an opportunistic entrepreneur who's doing something completely outside of your expertise area, it's very likely there's a team that's more fit to solve it than you. So why should a VC fund you versus that other team? Market size. Maybe you found a real problem, but is it a big problem? What market are you in? How much maneuverability do you have within that market? Let's say your first idea doesn't work. Can you easily move to another idea? Scalable customer acquisition. I see a lot of ideas that are actually real problems, and they're interesting. They're interesting startups to be working on. But one of the reasons they haven't been done yet, which is a big question VCs ask, is like why is now the right time to do this? Is because there's no easy way to scalably acquire customers. So this is something to think about. Is am I going to be able to exponentially get more customers? Is one customer going to bring in their friend, or is this going to be just an uphill slog where I have to bring customers in 1 by 1 or 10 by 10 or 100 by 100? If it's a space like that, it's not interesting. And that speaks to network effects. A lot of VCs will only fund businesses that actually have network effects. What I mean by network effects is your company's growth rate is a function of its size. So that's the same way as saying that you can grow exponentially. If I have 1,000 users, does that help me get 1,000 more? If I have 1 million, does that help me get 1 million more? That's the kind of business that can grow exponentially, that can be a breakaway success that VCs like to fund. They don't like to fund those linear growth businesses. One example is, let's say I'm making a loyalty program for restaurants. I see this one all the time in Silicon Valley. I see around 500 pitches a year, by the way, in Silicon Valley. So I have a lot of context on this. But I've seen maybe 10 or 20 people say, oh, I'm going to make this better loyalty card for a restaurant. It's going to be linked to mobile, and you'll have a dashboard, and they'll get data and analytics on customers. And they're so excited about it. But what they don't realize is it's not interesting to VCs, because they have to go restaurant by restaurant by restaurant and close all these people. That's an example of business with no network effects. Defensibility. So this kind of relates to network effects. If you have strong network effects, really that is your defensibility. If you don't have strong network effects, that might be okay if you have some proprietary technology or IP or patents that protect you, so that even if you grow linearly, you can't have 10 other competitors who are growing linearly and eating your market. Proven business model. I haven't seen many startups get funded by VCs that are inventing a whole new business model. Most companies don't do a lot of innovation there. So whether it's subscription or advertising or virtual goods or just kind of a purchase model, I would use something proven, because trying to teach your customers that they should want your product and also pay for something in a whole new way is very difficult. People guard their pocketbooks very closely. Entry vector we talked about earlier. VCs will look at sort of what your entry vector is. Do you really understand how to get into a market? And finally, and these are sort of ordered in level of importance, do you have a smart product plan? So oftentimes investors, and by extension you, when you're looking at an idea, it's not necessarily so important that the specific product you're doing is going to work or is a really smart idea. Often it's more a question of like, are you able to think intelligently about the product? You just have to have an initial direction that's smart, and generally investors will be like, okay, they can figure it out. The final business will probably look nothing like this, but this is proof to me that they can come up with a good product idea. And last thing that's not on here is, previous slide please, is exit strategy. So this is something every VC will kind of be asking themselves in the back of their mind. Since, as I said earlier, you're probably not going to IPO, at least with your first business. It has happened before, but it's not common. They're gonna be asking themselves, for this company, is there somebody who could actually buy this? And the best way for you to understand this, I could get up here and talk about it for 10 minutes, but the best way to understand it is just read TechCrunch every day, or TechMeme, or whatever your tech blog of choice is. Look at what kind of companies get acquired, and try to build an understanding of why those companies got acquired. Form hypotheses, test them as you read more news stories, whatever works for you. But that's kind of how I learned this for myself. Okay, so homework on this before we get to the exercise. As I said earlier, talk to investors, and I really can't emphasize this enough. Even for me, seeing 500 pitches a year, I go to probably 10 demo days a year. I meet entrepreneurs all the time. Probably 3 days a week I spend doing meetings with just different entrepreneurs. Even for me, talking to really sharp investors, I almost always learn something new. It almost always challenges my assumptions. The reality is investors have their heads in this every single day. Investors are looking for ideas every single day. They're always going to have, no matter how smart you think you are and how much you've looked at one space, the problem is sometimes as the entrepreneur you can miss the forest for the trees. You can delve too much into the detail of something. Investors can help you zoom out and say, oh, cool idea, but 10 companies tried that last year and they all failed. And that's just the kind of thing you might not have enough context to know. And another thing you can do, finally, is I made this little thing called hobby.vc. You can check this out right now on your laptops if you like. It's basically a shared Google spreadsheet where you can go place bets on different companies and essentially practice investing. You may not have the capital right now to go write $10,000 or $20,000 checks to different startups. If you don't, you can go into something like this, and you and your friends can play a game where you kind of see who's the better investor. Just place a bet. Don't go back and change it, and then 3 months, 6 months, a year down the road, go back and look at it, see how you did. I recommend this sort of like paper investing, sort of fantasy investing for people who are trying to learn how to come up with ideas. Okay, next. So I don't know, any organizers, do we have any time for Q&A, or should we go into the exercise? Sorry? Okay, great. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so this is optional, but you may find this valuable or interesting. The exercise is to argue for or against 8 ideas. So I've laid out 8 ideas here that I'll kind of explain briefly, so you understand the taglines. Go to this form here, bit.ly/gsy-ideation, and it just has 8 text boxes. There's a 200-character limit on each text box. So you can go to this form, you can fill it out, just write brief arguments about each of these ideas, and then there may be a prize later. I'm actually gonna go back and read all of these today as you guys are working. So if you want me to send you feedback or something like that, feel free to throw your email address in somewhere. But I'm gonna go through it. Whoever does the best, I'll come find them. Okay, so going through these one by one. Airbnb for dog boarding. The idea here is I could rent out my house for people to board their dogs. So if you're going on vacation, I could take your dog and you pay me some money. Goal tracking for self-improvement enthusiasts. A lot of people in the world have goals: lose weight, quit smoking, have better fitness, learn a new language. The idea here would be to make a product that lets you track that goal, track your progress, get friends to help you, learn about best practices. Number 3, sensor network and analytics for farmers. A lot of people have farms. The idea here would be you sell little sensors people can sprinkle in their farm, and then they have an analytics dashboard they can look at that shows them levels of precipitation, humidity, the weather, how fast crops are growing, etc. Airbnb for exotic cars. Let's say I have a Ferrari. I probably don't use my Ferrari all the time, so I could rent it out for somebody else to try. So this could be a cool idea because you might not want to buy a Ferrari, you might just want to rent one for one day for $500. So it kind of creates some efficiency in that market. There's a lot of exotic cars that sit in garages. There's actually a lot of boats. Another one that's not here is an Airbnb for boats. There's a company called Boatbound in San Francisco. Turns out boat owners only use their boats 12 times a year, so they're trying to rent boats out. Number 5, social network for item collectors. A lot of people like to collect antiques or teddy bears or Barbie dolls or kind of different unique sorts of items. So bringing all that together, bringing those people online and giving them a forum to collaborate and share and maybe trade and buy items from each other. Number 6, Uber for mobile phone repair. Let's say I drop my phone getting off the stage and I want to get it fixed. I can go on a friend's phone, tap something, and a technician will come out and fix my phone for me immediately, versus me having to mail it in or go to a local store. Number 7, a listing service for local activities. Let's say I want to explore Malaysia and I want to see what, or Kuala Lumpur, and I want to see what concerts are there, or is there like a cool museum or a show or a guided tour somewhere. I could go on this website, all the activities would be there, I can choose activities. Finally, mint.com for local governments. Local governments, a lot of government systems have separated budgets for local versus federal. So the idea here might be for local governments, giving them software that helps them manage their budget and track things better. Great, so I think that's it. The organizer will come up and let you know how much time you have for that activity. If you want to ask me anything, I'll be over afterwards. Thank you, hope that helps.